I once thought I had it all figured out. Life was good. I had a steady job, a beautiful home, and a loving wife. Or at least I thought she was loving. We had been married for 23 years. You'd think after that long, you'd know someone, right? I guess that's the thing about life. It throws curveballs when you least expect them. It all started on a business trip to Chicago. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but my boss needed someone to cover for him last minute, so off I went. I was having drinks with an old friend, Barry. We were catching up, talking about the good old days when we used to work together at Martin's. And then he mentioned it. He didn't even realize what he was saying. "You know, I saw Sandy and Dale a few weeks back. Seemed like they were having a pretty good time. Didn't know you were cool with that," he said casually, taking a sip of his beer. My stomach dropped. Dale was Sandy's boss, and Barry wasn't the type to gossip, so when he said having a good time, I knew exactly what he meant. I tried to play it cool, asked a few more questions, but I was barely listening to his answers. My mind was racing. When I got home, I confronted Sandy. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to know. At first, she denied everything, said Barry must have misunderstood. But the more I pressed, the more she cracked. Eventually, she admitted it. She'd been seeing Dale for months. "It just got out of hand," she said, like that was supposed to make it better. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there staring at her, feeling like my whole world had just collapsed. We had built a life together. 23 years of memories, of love, of shared experiences, and now it all felt like a lie. She tried to explain. She said it wasn't about me, that it had nothing to do with our marriage. "It just happened," she kept saying. "It wasn't planned." She even tried to convince me that it had no effect on her work, that it wasn't about getting ahead or securing contracts. But honestly, I didn't care. I wasn't thinking about her job or her career. I was thinking about about what we had. Or what I thought we had. For days, I couldn't think straight. Divorce was on my mind, but the thought of it terrified me. We had been through so much together. Good times, bad times, everything in between. Could I really throw all of that away? Could I really start over at my age? I found myself replaying every moment of our marriage, trying to figure out where it went wrong. Was there something I missed? Something I could have done differently? But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she had kept it from me for so long, that she had looked me in the eye day after day and lied to me. Eventually, I made up my mind. I couldn't live like this. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay, that we could just move on like nothing had happened. So I filed for divorce. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I second-guessed myself, but deep down, I knew it was the right decision. There was a part of me that wanted revenge. I thought about suing Sandy's company or going after Dale, but in the end, I realized it wasn't worth a whit. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who lets bitterness and anger control his life. So instead, I focused on moving forward, on rebuilding. I moved out of our house and got my own place. It was strange at first, being on my own after so many years, but it also felt liberating. I started to distance myself from Sandy. We kept things civil for the sake of the divorce, but I made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with her beyond that. And then, out of nowhere, Pauline came into my life. She was a colleague, someone I had worked with for years but never really noticed until now. We started talking more, grabbing coffee together after work, and before I knew it, we were spending more and more time together. It wasn't easy, jumping into a new relationship so soon after everything that had happened. There were moments when I felt guilty, like I was betraying Sandy all over again, even though I knew that didn't make any sense, but Pauline was patient. She understood what I was going through, and she didn't push me to move faster than I was ready for. The divorce was finalized a few months later. By then, I had started to find my footing again. I won't lie and say that everything was perfect. I still had my bad days, my moments of doubt and regret, but I was moving forward. And that was what mattered. Looking back, I realized that the whole experience taught me something important. Life doesn't always go the way you plan, but that doesn't mean it's over. Sometimes you have to let go of the past to make room for something new. And that's okay. My name is Emily, and if you had asked me just a few years ago, I would have told you I had the perfect life. I was married to a wonderful man named James for almost a decade. We lived in a cozy suburban home, had a dog named Max, and even had our favorite spots in town. James was everything I thought I wanted. He was attentive, sweet, and hard-working. But sometimes, no matter how perfect things seem, you can't always predict where life will take you. It all started innocently enough. James was working more and more hours at his job, trying to secure a promotion. I supported him, of course, but that also meant he wasn't around as much. The long hours turned into late nights, and the late nights turned into weekends at the office. I found myself spending more time alone, just me and Max, binge-watching TV shows, waiting for him to come home. At first, I didn't mind. I told myself it was temporary, that it would all be worth it once James finally got that promotion. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I started feeling lonely. I felt like a ghost in my own home, just going through the motions. And James, well, he was more like a roommate than a husband. Around that time, my old high school friend Mark reached out to me. We hadn't talked in years, but seeing his name pop up on my phone brought back a flood of memories. We were close back in the day, practically inseparable, but life happened, and we lost touch after college. He had just moved back to town and wanted to reconnect. I didn't think much of it, so I agreed to meet up for coffee. That coffee turned into hours of catching up, reminiscing about old times. It felt so easy, so natural. Mark was still the same charming, funny guy I remembered, but now he had this maturity about him that was comforting. He listened, really listened, as I vented about James and how distant our marriage had become. Mark sympathized with me, shared stories of his own failed relationships, and before I knew it, I found myself looking forward to our coffee dates more and more. I should have seen the signs, I should have known where this was headed, but I was in denial. I convinced myself that it was just harmless fun, that I wasn't doing anything wrong. After all, James and I were still together, even if he wasn't physically present most of the time. But one night, after a particularly emotional day, Mark and I had a little too much wine, and things escalated. I won't sugarcoat it. We slept together. It was like a floodgate opened and all those pent-up emotions, all that loneliness just poured out. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment, I didn't care. I felt alive again, like I had found a piece of myself that I didn't even realize I had lost. And Mark, well, he maybe feel seen, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The guilt didn't hit me right away. For a while I tried to keep things normal at home, acting like nothing had changed, but deep down I knew everything was different. I was lying to James, and that lie hung over me like a dark cloud. Every time he kissed me, every time he told me he loved me, it felt like a dagger to my heart. But I didn't stop seeing Mark. I couldn't. I told myself that I needed him, that he was the only thing keeping me sane. But secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they? One evening, James came home earlier than usual. Mark had just left, and I hadn't had time to clean up the mess we made. There was a wine glass still sitting on the counter, and the smell of his cologne lingered in the air. James noticed right away. He wasn't stupid. He asked me, point blank, if I was seeing someone else. I froze. My mind raced, trying to come up with some sort of explanation, but nothing came out. The silence was deafening, and in that moment, I saw the realization wash over his face. He didn't yell, didn't accuse me of anything. He just looked at a kursekturlant. My. at this hurt in his eyes that I'll never forget. And then he turned and walked out the door.